We acknowledge the Darug people of the Eora Nation as the traditional owners of the land we work on. We pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging.
Always was, always will be.
Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast Mindkshetra Talks Lost in Translation. We are a mother and daughter duo, Indian Australians living in Sydney. We are using our personal experiences and insights to connect and relate with people with similar experiences.
We are using this podcast as our voice to unpack topics that are often lost in translation within our South Asian community. We are doing this podcast with the intention to break down the barriers in communication that may exist between parents and children, and we hope to offer some talking points to instigate these conversations. Hi everyone, welcome to the 8th episode of Mindkshetra Talks Lost in Translation, and this is the final episode of the first season. We've come a long way. This has been our first shot at podcasting, and it's been a journey. We're just trying to find our voice. We may not necessarily have had a huge following, but we tried our best with the knowledge and resources we have, and we hope to be back next year with a second season with some special guests. But I guess we hope you enjoyed this season and the topics we discussed.
I am
Yeah.
so excited about today's topic. And also, I'm so grateful that we were able to consistently work on this and actually record 8 episodes. When we started and I pitched this particular journey, I thought it was, we didn't know how it was going to be. So it's been really good walking with you and working with you. Yes, and of course, walking as well. Today's topic is something which I find it's controversial whenever I start this topic with the peers. It's because it is very unique. But I think in the style of Mindkshetra talks, we are hoping this conversation instigate a lot of interesting ideas. Um, and hope, and I'm not suggesting that again, whatever we are sharing is should be what is followed, but we are trying to unpack. And it is all about independence. So, question for you, Riti, is a lot of young people
Yes.
your age, especially when we talk about Western culture, a lot of people your age,
Mm.
early 20s, I'm going to say it, early 20s, are already living out of home.
Yeah.
So, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
But you are living at home with us. So, how do you think that
Yeah.
affects your independence?
I mean, I guess I've been raised always to be very independent
Mm-hmm.
as a kid. I guess it's like should start with that. Like even before there was this before I came of the age where I was aware that people were living outside, there's always been some sort of like independent streak that I've been like raised with, and it's been like a very gradual progression. Like it started off, you know, because I think there's different types of independence. It started off with you used to like drop and pick up from events, and then it became, try and find your own way there, like use public transport. And then, when you start earning, it's like, okay, you have a sense of financial independence. So it's like, okay, now you have some money, you can start paying for these like little things yourself. Like it wasn't like if you think about it, when you're a kid and you go out with your friends, it's kind of like, oh, your mum or dad or parent will give you some money, like a little pocket money for spending. But then when you start earning, you start going into the mindset of, okay, I have so and so amount to spend. So that's how I need to know how to spend, and I need to know
Mm-hmm.
how to spend my money. But in terms of living at home versus by yourself, I think I've never lived alone. Like I've never had the experience of living alone. That saying, I really do want to move out of my house. And like people listening to this are gonna be like, is it so bad that you want to move out? Like, no, not for that reason. Like I love living at home. Everything is done for me. Everything is, I don't have to worry about a lot of things. But I guess I want to prove to myself that I
Mhm.
can be independent. And I think there's so many layers when it comes to being independent. You get to find out your likes, your dislikes, you get to find out what type of person you are by yourself. Are you kind of someone who likes to stay in and go out? Because then there's like this other thing of independence. Because if you're living outside of your house, then you kind of got to think, okay, um, like there's nobody to drop and pick me up. So I have to figure out how to go to and from the place. And I think when I speak to a lot of people, like a lot of my uni friends, they all live either, most of them live by themselves, or should I say,
Mhm.
like, not with their parents. They'll live with like
Mhm.
roommates, flatmates, housemates,
Mhm.
but not with their parents. And when I speak to them, like, what's the experience living out of home? Like, the discussions vary from, oh my God, like, I love it, or there's a lot of layers and nuances of like, oh my God, the
Mhm.
rent is so expensive. Like, I wish I lived with my parents, but at the same time, I love living outside of my house. And the interesting thing is that then impacts the independent decisions that you make. And living outside of home, what I've noticed when I speak to my friends who do live without, like, not with their parents, it impacts like how their values. And I remember I was talking to someone and she said, for me, it's kind of a deal breaker if I'm going out with this guy and he says that he lives with his parents. And I was like, that's so interesting. Why do you say that? She's like, I don't know. It's just like I've been on that journey where I've lived by myself and I've had that time to live by myself. So when I see someone else who's not really there yet, it just kind of puts into perspective that we're not in the same place. And I thought that was so interesting. Like there's so many levels and layers that happens when you kind of throw yourself in the deep end of
Yeah, and
independence.
also, there is something about a couple of things maybe you need to clarify about being at home. It's not all that rosy for you, also. Like, you do have some expectations now that you're an adult. Yeah, a lot of things become
Yeah.
easy when you're living at home with your parents. In terms of,
There's just like unconscious things like you don't have to worry. Like if I say living at home, the main example I can think of just at the top of my head
Mhm.
is like groceries. Like if you live at home with your parents buy the groceries and like they pay for that. And in terms of rent, like you don't need to worry about that because it's your parents that are paying the mortgage or the rent if you're like renting
Yeah, and we will
a
talk in
place.
detail about what
It's not
your
you doing
expectations
that.
are within rent in itself. For me, I also think when you live
Mm.
alone, there is a lot of choices you get to make on your own and make mistakes, especially when it comes to dating or bringing a partner or going out or
Yeah.
like, staying late or going with friends, going out for a movie or so and so. If you live at home, then that kind of there is a barrier that stops you from doing a lot of things which you would normally kind of do in this age, I think. So, and that's in a South Asian family,
Mm.
dating and all was something I was never allowed to do. I didn't even think that was, but it's so, I think it is a very part of this life as well. So that was an adjustment for me also,
Mm.
like.
I mean, like, what would your experience? Because when you grew up in India and like back in the day, when you were younger than you are now,
I'm not that old.
uh, what was your experience? Because, like, I assume the only instance that you left at home was with your partner, and once you got
I'll give you a
married.
clear
Otherwise,
picture.
there was
So
not really a
imagine,
sense.
like, you are now heading the age where I got married. So imagine getting married in 6 months' time, getting married to
Yeah.
somebody you've met for a short time, but you've dated. So in your words, it's like dated for 3 months, and you are now leaving everything, not only your parents, but also the city which you lived in, your friends which everything, and you're moving to a completely different country with a new person.
Mm.
That's what happened to me.
Mm.
So I was in all
Mm.
like early 22, and I got married, and my husband does not come from the same state as me, so I had to move to his place to people I knew in 2 months. And then I had to fly out of the country within the 4 months of getting married because I had to move to UAE with a new person. And I was not financially independent at all because that was not an expectation set for me.
Mm.
Um, what I
Mm.
can tell you about that is I became a very, very dependent person, like financially dependent,
Yes.
decision making wise
Yes.
dependent, because not only was I not financially independent because I didn't have a job at that time, I also did not know the place. I did not have any friends.
Mm.
So I had to make a lot of adjustments, and naturally, his existing friends became my friends. So whoever I had to make friends, or we did make friends together later eventually, but the impact on your mental health is you're constantly trying to make a relationship work and also trying to create new relationships based on where so it's a little bit of a lot of adjustment phase, and you go through a lot more. You grow up quickly. When I was doing it, I found it interesting and inspiring and exciting, but I also think I was a lot frustrated and scared and felt lonely and homesick and a lot of other things, and also just adjusting to the fact that now I have to live with somebody who I barely know.
Mm. And do you think that like played a had a big impact on like knowing who you were as a person because you never had um the freedom and the experience of living by yourself, like just by yourself before you got married? It was kind of like, oh, you're almost like unconsciously attached to this person, so when you become dependent you just assume all the decisions they make are the right ones, and you
I
just
think it takes
assume
a lot
that
of I
they
think
know
it takes a
better.
lot of a toll in a partnership when you don't meet as equals. And in all 21 years old,
Yeah.
I did not explore most of the stuff, and I was fascinated by the stuff I was doing, and I only had a very limited amount of experience in terms of exposure. It's good and bad
Mm.
because there was opportunity for us both to explore the world as a couple and what we liked together, what we did not like. And I was doing it on my
Mm.
own with the person, but I was one of the fortunate ones who had a good partner. However, I
Yes.
think this fundamentally, if you're not financially independent, or if you haven't, not even financial independence is a very small part of it. If you're not independently making decisions for yourself, especially as a woman, especially as a South Asian woman, because you are already dealing with a lot of conditioning, you're dealing with a lot of patriarchy, then unconsciously you also have your own limitations within yourself. Can you do this, can you do that, can you go out with them, who's supposed to, you take a lot of default positions on yourself without even understanding, but you don't even realize that you're doing most of the stuff what your partner likes, and this is not something you would have not necessarily done for yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
then the difference between finding what is care and what is control becomes very hard.
That's yeah. That line
Very
is so
hard.
blurred by the end of it, and it's like, am I like you don't even, and you yourself are not even able to distinguish that, and it's like the other person's not going to tell you, like the other person's not going to be like, yes, I this is control, and like you're not even going to be able to
I think
distinguish that.
if you don't have a conscious partner and they didn't have a good template growing, and they have only seen patriarchy and they've only seen their parents treating their wives, mother, and whatever they have learned unconsciously gets transferred. I think you have to, even for men, they don't intend to do, it's not very consciously somebody wants to control. They don't even, like, we in South Asian thing, we don't talk about this care, control, all these words I have learned now. you know Everything, if a
Mm.
husband says something, you're supposed to do it. I remember
Yeah.
so many decisions where, you know if I had to go back to India, or if I had to visit my parents, I didn't have the money, not and I had to actually ask, okay, is it possible to go? Then, it's like I said, it is not, again, I have been one of the luckiest peoples, and but I think in structurally, framework wise also, independence is something which has to be coming down from generations, both for boys and girls, and understand that they have to be
Amazing.
at
Yes.
par. You have to enter the relationship as a partner.
Yes. It's a partnership. It's not a
Yeah, but
dictatorship.
also independence also then comes down to what is accountability, what are you accountable for, how much, what is being fair and what is unfair, and you know
It's such a layered question. Like you could talk about this topic for hours and hours, and you could go on to like what does it truly mean to be independent? And then you go into the thing of like, are you hyper independent? You're so independent on yourself that you don't even need to rely on someone else. Like that's another form. That's like independence. Like everything has a spectrum. Like there's dependency, like codependency, where like you cannot even breathe without the other person, and then there's like hyper independence where you're so independent that you are like, I can do everything myself. But it's like there has to be a point in the middle where it's like, I know how to do things myself, but also I'm not afraid to ask for help and be independent and be, I don't want to use this word, but I I'm not I'm independent, but I know that I can ask for help and be dependent
depend I know how to
when I need
depend
to
on other
be.
people, and I have people to depend on when the time gets tough. I don't have
Yes,
to
I
do it
have people
alone.
to depend on.
Yes.
Yes, yes, that says what everything. Like I'm not saying like people are gonna listen to this and like take it to the extreme, but like I'm also saying like being hyper independent,
Mm-hmm.
absolute no no. That's not good for your mental health. That's not good for the people
But
around you, because
tell
then
me
that
one
starts
thing.
you start.
How many
Yes.
people are actually hyper independent? We have a lot of, in South Asian cultures, I think there's a lot of codependency more than hyper independent. I kind of feel like
Mm.
I know I'm comparing two different things. Like sometimes in, I think that is also the scare. We are scared as South Indian, at least as I can speak for myself. Sometimes I feel very scared. Like if I give you so, if again, I hate when some a parent says, I'm giving you so much independence. When you give something to somebody, that is not you, it is your handing. Independence is not something to give. Like I don't have to ask a permission to another adult to do something. I can consult with another adult. Same way, just because you are my child, you have all the, like, you, it's human right, you have all the, I'm not giving you anything. The minute I say I'm giving you something, that becomes like I'm in a power position. I have all this stuff going on and I am giving it to you. You have, it's yours to take, isn't
Amazing.
it?
Yeah.
100
Essentially.
percent. So for me, tell
I
me, how
agree.
many people in South Asian families? I think we have more of the codependency rather than the hyper dependency, and mostly it's a Western culture formula
Mm.
of a
I mean, I'm
hyper.
not saying like
Like I don't agree to not being part of your parents' family at all after you get married. Like they have to take care of that, and you are, you know, they are not your responsibility at all. Not even responsibility.
mm,
Like it's a little hard for me and complex for me to make it so simple. But one thing I wanted to talk
mm,
about and come back to between you and I is, do
mm.
you find it fair? So we were talking about independence and you having all these expectations.
Yes.
So this is one topic I cope a lot of bad, whatever what do you call this? Not even
Criticism.
criticism, flake. I take a lot of heat for this. Not only from people I don't know, but every time I talk about this topic, even to my peers, um, very, 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 I have coped a lot of heat and we still do. But I still want to go ahead and ask you the question. So, you do have an expectation set, and we did have a conversation when you turned and when you started working, and there is an expectation for you to pay rent because you're living at home. Do you
Yes.
find it that it is fair that
Yes.
we have this expectation? And what do you feel is the purpose of it? And do you feel like we are
Yes.
becoming
Okay.
unfair on this?
Yeah, I mean, like, yes, you did hear that right for people who are watching and listening. I pay rent monthly. It's not like compared to the rent prices of today, it's not a lot per month. It's just a little bit. But I think, okay, when I first was like you and Appa first brought this up, I remember I was like, that's not fair. How can you ask me to pay rent? I live at home. I'm not living outside. Like, how fair is that? Like, I don't agree. And like, what's the money going to? Like, it's not coming back to me. Because I know a lot of there's this concept I was reading or watching something somewhere that parents will ask their kids for rent, and then when they buy a house they'll like give it back to them. And you were like, well, we're just gonna keep it, like we're not spending it, it's just for you to learn. And I was like, that's not fair, how can I be asked? And then we like sat down and had at a convo, and then you kind of just explained. And I think the purpose of it was to teach me responsibility and was to prepare me for the real world on a very, 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 very
Mm-hmm.
small scale. Like the stakes are so low. It's not like in the real world where if you don't pay rent, you're going to be evicted, because it's my house. You're my parents. You're not going to evict me as soon as I
Maybe
start paying
that's what you
rent.
think.
But it's like,
No, you will not be
oh,
evicted. No, you
okay.
won't. I'm just kidding. I like
But it's
that
like
face.
things like it's a very
No, I won't.
I don't know.
Mm.
You pull out that plot twist. I mean, it's a very small scale. It's to teach you responsibility. It's to teach you, you have expenses to pay. And in the real world, the landlord or the owner is not going to care. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they want their rent. Like, they want it. And, like, in today's climate, like, you have to
Mm-hmm.
pay rent to live. And I think, like, looking now, I I'm in like two minds. Like, I'm half glad I do it. At the same time, it's like, it's not fair. Like, I would rather spend that money on something else. But I do feel like it's a good strategy that will prepare me for the real world. And like when I do move out, um, obviously it's gonna be per week and a lot more than I pay per month to you guys now. But um, it's just a taster of what's to come in the real world. And I think what was the unfair part about for me was that it was like I was the only one paying rent and my sister wasn't, but then I had to understand that she's a child, and when I was a child I wasn't paying
You
rent.
still are very, very. There's a bone of contention for you there all the time. I have to keep
So then
reminding
I'm
you
waiting
she's a
till she
child.
turns 18. Yeah, so then finally, I think when you were like, Rhea, you also will have to pay rent when you're 18, and her face just dropped, and I was like, thank you so much, thank you, fair treatment.
Oh.
I mean, in
Mm.
terms of well being, I think the well-being side comes from it is like there was a certain point where I was having a job but I wasn't
Mm.
earning any money, and your logic was if you have a job you have to pay rent, and you were very flexible. You and Apple were very flexible in the sense that there was a point also where I was unemployed for a while, and you were like, well, that doesn't make sense. We're your parents, like we'll support you and take care of you, like that's fine. Like other stuff you'll have to pay for if you go out with your friends or like make purchases on your own, that's fine. But we can't expect you to pay rent if you're unemployed. But then there was a point going back where I was employed, but I wasn't earning a lot of money. And I still had to pay rent. And I think that was where my well being went down, because I think it was just like a complex, like myriad of things. Like I don't have a job, but like I not that I don't have a job, but the job isn't giving me much money, and I'm like giving more as to rent rather than I'm earning. So it was more
That
like
is
that
half the
on a well
country for
being
you, my girl.
perspective.
That is half the country for you. A lot of people
Yes.
who are. It's a real
Yes.
struggle, and it does impact your well-being. But I think as parents we have a basic responsibility to ensure you are able to do it. And I always say the safety net is there, but don't don't you should not be thinking
Rely on
because
it.
we are there. And there are also rules around if you take the car, if you buy groceries, if you go out. Would you?
Yes. Like if I take the car and the petrol, it's like almost empty. Like it's out of my bank account that's coming. Um, like the I'm paying for like petrol because I'm earning and like I also use the car. So that's also a form of independence, like having the responsibility of paying for petrol and like driving. Like I don't ask money to pay for petrol. I'm earning. So it's my responsibility to pay for petrol and things like that.
Going
Yeah.
out, your own classes, your own stuff. You take care of all those things. And how
Mm.
independent do you think you are in terms of because you're still living at home? So how independent do you actually feel in terms of? Let's not talk about financial independence. Let's talk about the other part, which is the icky part, where the dating part and going out part, the drinking
Mm.
part. Hmm.
Mm. I mean, to be honest, like unconsciously, I always like will rely on
Mm-hmm.
you in some extent because I am living at home and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's just part of it. Like if I do go out, I automatically assume that you will pick me up if it's late.
Mm-hmm.
um like that's what I mean. Like if I'm being completely transparent and honest, like if it's late, um I will just assume like,
And
oh
what
yeah,
would
would you be able to
normally I
pick me
say
up
for
from the
that?
station? Whereas if I was living alone, it would be my
Mm-hmm.
responsibility to get to and from my house, which means probably like either plan it so that you catch the last bus or the last train that goes out, or catch an Uber. Like that's what I'll have to do in the real world, and that's what some of my friends do when they live outside. It's their responsibility, like to get to and from the venue,
Mm-hmm.
whatever form that is. Like some people drive, like that's fine, but some people don't drive, so it's their responsibility. But I mean, at living at home, I do feel like I am in. I feel like if we
Mm.
look at the spectrum, I am like middle independence, but like leaning towards the dependent side
Are
of
you?
the
Does that
spectrum.
worry you though?
If I'm being completely honest, I mean, I think it does because I think because I'm started paying rent, it's like putting me on the other side of the spectrum, like moving towards the more independent side. Um, but I think like now, like even when I make purchases, because the only independence I can think of is like financial
What about
independence.
decision making?
If we
How
take that,
independent do you feel in your decision making?
I mean, I for me personally, I like to get up. I like to ask
Hmm.
people I trust
And what do I
when I
do?
make
What do I
decisions.
do
I'm not
normally?
asking them to make the decision. I'm not asking them
Mm-hmm.
to make the decision for me. Like I will do my own research and I'll like try and make the best informed decision I can. But because I used to be very like I don't know if this is a star sign thing, but I cannot make one decision. Like I cannot stick to it because I will overthink everything. I don't know if it's just the Libra in me. I don't know if it's that, but it's like I can't just stick by one decision. I always
Mm-hmm.
like go back and forth. And then that got me into the habit of like asking you, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think I should do? But I think you taught me that like stick by a decision and just say like, look, this is the decision I am going to make. What do you think about this? And then you can kind of like say, well, I think like not like I think that's a good decision, but it's like, okay, like what, like you'll either challenge that or you'll like ask me questions to make sure like I'm
Mm-hmm.
happy with that
Mm-hmm.
decision. But like was that something like when you were growing up? I know we already touched on this. Like, were you always scared you were making the
Oh,
wrong
I'm
decision, so
from
you
the
just
other end of the
assumed that?
spectrum. I'm from a spectrum where decision making was not allowed for me. So I took it in my hand to make decisions. So the very first opportunity I got, I made decisions. I didn't worry about it. I was like, I make a mistake, I make a mistake. I decided I
Mm,
didn't want to stay in the same country. We decided to migrate. I decided to do stuff. I decided to study. I decided to take up running. I decided there were a lot of decision making. I did because that's what happens when you suppress somebody for a very long time. And I actually became the other end where I started what you call as hyper independence. Like I don't need
mm,
anybody to tell me anything. The only one good thing for me is because of the situation and the marriage, and because it's almost like Appa and I were, had to become friends, and we had our journey started simultaneously together. Our decision making process also, I'm very, very collaborative in decision making like that. But there was a time when I could not find my feet in the early ages where I was very dependent on even Appa to make a decision for me. Which job should I go?
mm.
Which this should I take? What should I wear? But it took a while for me to realize that those are some of the decisions I should be making. So I am not even
Mm,
the person I was when I was 21 years old. And I wish I had this amount of clarity
mm.
then.
Is that what you would tell your younger self if you could
100%.
go
I
back
would
in
say go
time?
explore, don't get married, which is what I keep telling you and which annoys the crap out of you because you think I am pushing you and you're not a person who likes decision making as well. So you kind of think, what kind of, and you have told me many times, what kind of mother are you? You're like the black dot when it comes to South Asian mothers. Most South Asian mothers, again, I don't want to generalize, but there is this stereotype of what a South Asian mother looks like, very pampering, very come home, I'll make you food, come. I'm very, very I'm very huggy and everything, but I'm much more that then go out. Why are you living at home? Find a job, do stuff, don't stay at home. What are you doing? Kind of a person.
Mm. That was also an important thing, I think, when, like, I feel like in the culture and the society I grew up, it is so normal. Like, it is normal. Like, I can't think of any other way. Like, we have all been brought up that, like, as soon as you're 15, I think, go out and, like, you work, you start working and you start earning money. And I think that's something, like, I wish was taught more in South Asian culture. At least when I was growing up, there was no concept of this. It was only until I started, like, in the Western Australian culture that we grew up in, and even, like, many Western countries, it's so common that when you are 14, like 14, 15, whatever the legal age is, you start working. And I think that was something that was a very big, like, jump in the deep end for me, because my first job was
Mm-hmm.
16, I think. I worked in a cafe. I wasn't very good at it, but it was the first sense of, like, independence and, like, being financially independent that I had. And I think that's something, like, everybody should do. I know, like, a lot of people are like, well, my parents do everything for me, but it's like, you are going to feel such a good sense of achievement when you are like, oh my god, I paid for this myself, I go and earn myself. And it starts giving you, like, you start getting a little bit more sense of freedom. So I think, like, that's something,
Oh,
like,
I
that was
cooped a
so good.
lot of
I mean,
criticism
you
for
obviously.
that from my immediate family, from my friends, from a lot of people within the culture as to why do you have to send somebody to work? Does she have to work to bring, to bring what is she going to do? This age is to study. You should be the provider. Let her study. Why are you putting additional pressure? Um, Even now, the rent conversation is like, that's very unfair. Um, yeah, supposed to.
I really think the opposite. Like, the people I've spoken to, I think they were all like, that's such a good thing. Like, that's such a such a great way of like taking that financial
I think the
independence head
spheres which we
on.
move on are completely different, and this goes to actually show in real life how, how our societies on the or the peer group which we move from influences are thinking. And one of the major drawbacks or barriers in a South Asian culture is, what will other people say about me? If I do this to my child,
Yeah,
what is
what
the
will
other
other
person
people
going to
say?
think? I i really don't care. You're my responsibility, not the other person's responsibility. Now when I say I don't really care, so does a lot of other parents, I know that. But but sometimes you kind of think, do you have to deal with all those things, noises around, and give an explanation and be defensive? Isn't it just easier not to work? And you don't have to work, because most of the parents who migrate have, are in good positions. Probably they don't need the funds, so they kind of say, what is the point of sending somebody to work and so hard to study? And I know a lot of them like to drop and pick up even like 20-year-olds and 21-year-olds. But I kind of feel, if you don't let them do the mistakes when they are, then they do, and then you don't set them up for how independence looks like, independent decision making doesn't happen. And I don't just mean by financial independence. Mm. And I
Mm.
also think a very crucial thing when it comes to independence is allowing you to date and meet people and explore that kind of finding a partner for yourself and moving to countries and
Like if we go back to like the dating example, like when I was talking to someone and they mentioned like, oh yeah, when I got someone like, I think it's like it's just kind of like not an ick, but it's a bit of a for me. It kind of raises a little bit of a beige flag when they say, when their attitude is, yeah, oh, I live at home because everything is done for me. And I was like, well, that makes so much sense because they've had the experience of living by themselves and like that now informs their values. Whereas if you ask me, and I say like, "Oh, is it a deal breaker for you if like he lives at home with his parents?" And I would say no because like that's not very fair of me to say like, "Oh, he needs to live by himself," but like I live at home. Like that's not a deal breaker. That's not a thing I would question. Like you live at your home with your parents, like that's
but
okay
I
with me
tell
because
you,
I
red
do
flags should
as
raise
well.
for
But what
you,
is
and the
your
red
in
flags, and for another person, when you tell them, I tell you this all the time, that it will be a red flag to even another person, that if they want to date you, it's a red flag that you're living with us, because from the outside.
I know that's what I mean. But like I think that's fine. Just I know the current climate and I know it's just a lot cheaper to live with your parents. The only line I would draw is the reasoning behind. Like why do you live with your parents? Oh, the rent is like really expensive, but I have intentions of moving out and I am looking and things like that. Like that's fine. If your reasoning is like, "Oh, everything is done for me." Like everything is I don't need to do anything, that's where I'd be like, oh, okay, maybe our the places that where we're
It's
at
it's
is a
it's
little
very
different.
common nowadays for a lot of even adult children to live with parents. You can still live with your parents and be independent. You know what I mean? You can still live like house gets guests. So the red flag should not be, are you living with your parents or not? The red flag should be, even if you're living with your parents, how independent are you? Because living with your parents in itself cannot
Yes.
be the criteria anymore in the financial climate we are. It is even very common for, if something happens, for us to move in with another family member, right? So that should not be. See, this is my pet peeve with this generation. Okay, and I'm going to go out and say it, and if you're going to backlash me, it's okay. We can have a conversation. I'm ready to have a conversation. I think this generation, and I know as soon as this comes out, at least from my home itself, I'll get a voice which says, how could you say this about all of us? And I'm not generalizing. Actually, yes, this is my observation about most of the people, young people who I come think. I think that you make assessments very quickly on a very superficial basis without talking through the underlying things about it. Yes, you are very conscious about other people's things and about accepting everybody, making the environment inclusive, and you're very earth conscious and everything. But on the flip side, some of you, or most of the people, young people I talk with, are also very quick to judge other people based on, living with parents. Oh no, red flag, green flag, red flag, green flag, red flag, green flag. And you don't talk about the actual red flag and green flag, which is understanding the nuance between care and control. Understanding
Mm.
that if a boyfriend is texting you at 2 o'clock in the night and not allowing you to talk to anybody else and is getting jealous, it's not actually care. It's not a sign of him wanting to be with you all the time. If you're tracking him on Facebook all the time, or if he forgets to give you a gift or something like that, or vice versa, that is, all those things. I went through those, so I am in a position to tell you, actually, ladies and gents, anybody who's going through a relationship, don't look at the superficial things, and don't be very quick at making judgments. And another thing is also the frustration which comes with dealing with stuff. And I think we are partially responsible for that as parents, because we have been giving you stuff like this. You want this, yeah, you have an iPad, you take it. You want an iPhone, you take it. uh, so now it becomes hard for us to go back and pull back and tell, work for it. Go work. Why should you
Mm.
work? You already had an iPad. You already have an iPhone. You did not earn that iPhone, but you have an iPhone. That's not up in from your money. So if I'm going to ask you and say, you know what, go and
Mm.
go to a fast food joint and you wait a table for 12 hours to get paid a certain amount of it, which could even not pay you rent, then you go, why? Why should I do it? So I think if
Mm. I think it's just teaching your responsibility at the end of the day, like independence on so many different levels. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
and I
what
also think don't be
that
too
teaches
quick to
you.
judge. I think independence has got many, many nuance levels, like anything to it, and don't be too quick to judge because somebody is living with a parent. That in itself is not a red flag or a green flag, if you know what I mean.
Mm.
There could be many reasons,
Fair enough.
but you should also
Fair enough.
just be, and you should not take advantage of living with your parents and treat it like, a laundry service and a grocery service. Everything gets done. You should try taking some responsibility also, I think. Hmm.
Mm. So, like, what would be your well-being well-being message to close out the episode?
I think I've told this many a times before also, in another context, but I think when it comes to independence, especially in South Asian parents, I struggle a lot to draw a line between what is independence and what is giving away to the Western culture, because I really don't have a template, because I have grown up in a other model. But I think the best thing to do is let them make the mistakes. Be there, take a step back. If they are 18, take a step back. Be there as a safety net. Don't make the decisions for them. Let them make the decisions. And if they are not making any decisions, wait. Don't step in. Because the more you step in, it's also a habit you're teaching them, that you will be there to take it. You'll come and step in and do it. If they fail, it's okay. You're
Mm.
there. You're there to dust them up and pick them up. Hmm. What is your,
Mm.
you think, as soon as you do you think, okay, I had to ask you one question before your well-being message. Will you charge rent to your kids when you have kids?
Uh, if and when I have kids, I think yes. I think I
Okay.
will.
At least for me, I have this conversation
Maybe,
recorded that
maybe,
you actually said you will, and it is fair. So I'm thank you.
but maybe not at the same time. Maybe I'll just, I
You
don't know.
said yes. You
It's
said
like,
yes.
yes,
So
maybe.
what's your no, no, you said
Maybe.
yes.
Mm.
What is your well-being message? So do you think as
Okay,
soon
I
as
think if and when I have, I think if and when I have kids, regardless of if I charge them rent or not, a non-negotiable that will happen is that as soon as they are legally of age, I am going to make them look for work and find a job. And I think that
Make them look
is
for work.
my well-being mess. I am. And I think that's my well-being message. I think a lot of young people kind of like rely on this safety net of their parents, and I think that's really holding you back from being the independent person that you can be.
If you're saying that you at 14 you can work, I think a lot of people, a lot of kids are struggling to manage their studies and work. And once you get, one of the arguments I have is that if you start working, then why are you going to be bothered to study? You're getting money in, and
Mm.
if you work more hours, why study? You can start earning.
I'm saying like education is important, like study, because like I mean it's different for every person. Some people will be like, I'm working now, so I don't need to study anymore. Like that's fine. I can't speak for every single person. I'm just saying like from my perspective, I would say have a job on the side, just like 1 or 2 shifts a week, something that's manageable for you, even if it's one shift that teaches you, okay, on this particular day, this is my work day. And like I just think that will teach you
So you're
independence.
suggesting if you are, you need to do both. Understanding, for me, I think it teaches time management.
Yes. Time management
I
essentially.
more than,
Yes.
yeah.
And like
Hmm.
knowing the
And
priorities.
kind of understanding
Yes.
how, because that's a life skill again to have as well. And I am so glad I
Time
was able
management.
to do these 8 episodes with you, and it was such a fun talking to you. And I am so proud of you. Thank you for being a wonderful co-host.
I thank you so much, Mommy. I think this first season has taught us a lot about podcasting, and like we hope you guys have enjoyed these 8 episodes. Like please let us know what you think. And we look forward to seeing you back for season 2
Next
next year.
year, amazing things I hope happens next year to us, and this podcast reaches more people. But till then, bye from us. And if you liked it, you know where to follow us, Mindkshetra or Mindkshetra Talks. And it's a bye for the season from us.
Bye, everyone.
Have
Have
a
a
good
good year.
year. I was going to say Happy Diwali, but Happy Diwali, Happy Christmas, Happy New Year. See you.
Ha-
Bye.
Bye.